A lot of people just don't get this feast day. Its power and its prominence, its life-altering message is lost. It's muted. It's somehow not at all experienced by many. Some of that power is even missed on us as well. Even though we gather and celebrate this empty tomb, this risen Christ, its power doesn't change the way we live our everyday lives. The truth is, this day really takes on its biggest power, its strongest effect for those who acknowledge and recognize the darkness within them. And those who have lived in that time know the inner experience of how lost they can feel, or how it seems as though there is no way God can reach them. Did you notice in the gospel the setting? It says, early in the morning, while it was still dark. That gives us a little hint. It seems the power of this feast day, this Easter, this Resurrection Sunday, is best known in the darkness of those places where we want to hide or shelter ourselves. In the same way, we know that just as Peter and James and Mary experienced the wonder and the confusion in the darkness of that tomb, they come to a new awareness of who they are and the power of God in that darkness. The gospel account tells us that Mary Magdalene went there but confused, goes back and tells Peter. He comes and still not fully understanding, returns. But as they gather, they begin to understand. All that he said was true. All that he promised has happened. So now all is different. All is new. Mary, perhaps at first, had known the greatest hurt. For it was she who had been healed, she who had been lifted up. It's Christ who first looks at her and finds within her that dignity was always alive, but she had not recognized. So when she sees the darkness of the tomb, some of her hope falls away. It seems as though her own life is now drained away. Her hope facing that empty tomb is greatly diminished. In this past week, there are others who have faced, different settings, but they too have known a challenge to their hope. They have known some darkness in their life as well. Someone who was called into their boss's office, and they were told that unfortunately, although they do good work, there was going to be a reorganization and there really was no job for them. And they would have to go home and tell their family the news. Someone else received the news that their illness was really more serious, even life-threatening. And they would have to return and figure out how they were going to live and how long they were going to live. Someone else received another kind of news. They received the news of someone they have loved for a long time, a spouse or a family member or a friend. And suddenly they are telling them they do not any longer want them as a part of their lives. Or someone else who sits alone waiting for that son and daughter to come home. It's late, beyond the time they had agreed, and they wonder, is this another relapse again? Will we have to go through another whole round of rehab? No one is ready to encounter Easter when they're in the darkness. Darkness always seems to overpower it at first. For we do not expect an Easter. We do not expect a light in the midst of our darkness. For some of us, we have lived in darkness so long, although we dread it, somehow we find it a little comforting, don't we? We have to admit that somehow, at least we know the darkness. At least once you're in the darkness, nothing bad can happen to you anymore. It's already happened. So some of us cling to the darkness. Old ways of living, old patterns of life, old sins. It just became comfortable. But yet the darkness leaves no light, no joy, no hope. And that's where Easter, it shines its light on all those dark spaces in our life and says it is possible. Life can emerge. Hope can happen. Brokenness can be mended. That's what the hope of this day is. So it is really in our darkness that you and I can best experience the power, the transformation of this Easter Sunday. It is not just about rising from the dead. It is about rising above all the darkness in our life, rising above all that holds us down, all that entombs us, all that would seal us away from the very source of life. We stand then with Peter and James and Mary and look in at that empty tomb. And because of that, we know nothing more can ever conquer us. Nothing further can ever take away our joy. Nothing more can keep us down. Not with that empty tomb. If God has conquered death, surely we can overcome any darkness that haunts or even stalks us. Most of us know that that empty tomb holds a lot of hope. So what it does for us is it says, then if you come to celebrate this Easter, if you embrace the truth of this feast day, then you cannot live in darkness. No longer can you inhabit those tombs. So just as you celebrate Christ's coming out of the tomb, then you and I must empty our darkness, empty our tombs, and no longer say we will be captive, nor will we live inside them. This day frees us, not just at the end of our life, but in the midst of our living. Frees us from whatever darkness haunts us, overshadows us, and would rob us from the joy and hope that is ahead. This day says, if you are going to celebrate that empty tomb, then make sure you empty all the other ones.